So welcome back, guys. My name is Juan. I am just one reader, and I am here for another recent reads wrap-up. These are books numbers 17 through 19 that I've read so far in 2017. So without any further ado, I'm just gonna go. Book number 17 that I read this year was Death of a Salesman. This is a classic play by Arthur Miller. It's kind of one of those quintessential, really American plays. It really plays on the central idea, the central theme of work and identity in terms of the American dream. I sort of have mixed feelings about this book. I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed more than anything else reading a play. I thought that reading a different format, following a script and dialogue rather than the usual literary elements that I encounter when I read novels, I thought that was the part that I enjoyed the most as a reading experience overall. However, I thought the story itself was a little bit confusing, not because it's very complicated, since it's a very internal, kind of thought driven, very character driven play. I thought it was kind of confusing because I've never watched this play, I've never seen it staged, performed. So this was my first encounter with this material, and to experience it for the first time as a written text, as a written play, you cannot imagine everything that probably goes on stage when they perform it live. So there were some moments, particularly there were some moments that got me just very confused because it sort of jumps back and forth in time, and the settings also shift. So that sort of threw me off a little bit, but then I was able to sort of recover from that and get the gist of what Arthur Miller wanted to convey. I enjoyed most of the elements of the story and the characters and the way that the story talks about a period of the United States of America that I think is really interesting, and I think it did a pretty good job at that. My only issue, and I think it's a big issue for me, is that I found this play a little bit outdated, and also I found some of the dialogue and some of the way that the characters conducted themselves to be a little bit unbelievable, a little bit unrealistic, verging on spoon feeding the reader, or in this case, the viewer, the person that is watching, experiencing the show. I found that sometimes the characters would just say these lines that felt like to have the capacity, to have the ability of expressing such raw emotion, such conflict in a verbal, mature, elaborate way. It just felt very overdramatic and sort of very unrealistic. So I was kind of iffy about that, but the rest of the book I enjoyed it. Having said that, this play had some really amazing quotes and lines and dialogues, and my favorite one is on page 76, and it is, "Willie, when are you gonna realize that them things don't mean anything? You named him Howard, but you can't sell that. The only thing you got in this world is what you can sell. And the funny thing is that you're a salesman and you don't know that." So overall, I gave it 3 stars. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's not something I would reread. It's not a play that I would necessarily recommend. I would suggest reading one of Woody Allen's plays. Personally, I enjoy that type of script a lot more. So I'm not really sure about this one. I'm really glad that I read it because I've always sort of had Death of a Salesman up on a pedestal, and I never knew what it was about, and now I can feel confident enough to say that at least I've read it, and I know what the deal is. So I liked it, but I sort of at the same time felt disappointed by it, and I also felt kind of guilty. I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes when you read such a quintessential classic, such an important book, you feel kind of dumb because either you didn't really fully get it or you feel guilty because you didn't love something that is so well loved by many people, generations really. So, Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller, 3 stars. The next book I read could not have been more different. This was book number 18, and this was Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians by Brandon Sanderson. He is a very popular and beloved, prolific author, mostly in the science fiction and fantasy genre. He's typically known for writing these big, long, sprawling, epic fantasies that usually are at least trilogies or, in some cases, more than 3 books long. And I'm very excited about reading his trilogy. What's the name? The Mistborn trilogy, which you can actually see in my shelves. I think it's right there. That one, right there. That's the box set. But I haven't really had the time and the mental space to read something that is going to take a lot, as that series would. So I decided to try this one out. This one is a middle grade fantasy adventure story, and I loved it. It was exactly the type of read that I needed at that particular moment in my hectic, overcomplicated life that is full of responsibilities and work and different jobs. This was just such a nice break. I spent one entire afternoon reading this, and I did not want to stop reading. This book follows Alcatraz, who is uh, a character that you could compare to your stereotypical, let's call him your Harry Potter type of character. He has been living with his people. He doesn't really know much about his past. Then something happens, and some quirky, wacky, weird, wonderful characters come along and tell him stuff about his past. He starts building up an identity of who he really is and what is his purpose. So, in some ways, it felt like a little bit tropey, but middle grade books, particularly in this genre, can be tropey. They tend to be tropey. I don't really see a negative side of tropes if they are done correctly and not in an annoying, obvious, cliched way. And I think Brandon Sanderson did a really great job with this one. This is actually the first one in a series of 5 books. I'm not sure I will continue. I think I got what I wanted and what I needed from this book, which was getting a taste, a sample of Brandon Sanderson's writing style. I really love that, so now I'm confident that whenever I do pick up the Mistborn trilogy, I will like it, probably love it. So, like I said, this book was just full of adventure, a lot of action, quirky characters, and I really enjoyed that. Brandon Sanderson's storytelling is fantastic, and that was my favorite part, without a single doubt, from this book. That was what I enjoyed the most, was Brandon Sanderson's writing and how he has such a way with words and he plays with the reader constantly. He is so funny, and this is one of those voices. The narrator has one of those voices that are so delightful and so funny and clever and witty and sarcastic, and you feel like you are participating in the story. You are an active spectator, not just a passive spectator. So I really enjoyed it. I gave it like a 3.5 star rating, which for a middle grade is pretty high. Really recommend this. If you have students, children of your own, or if you're just connected to children in any way, I recommend these books to put into their hands because there's a big chance they will fall in love with reading. And last but certainly not least, I read Fever Dream. This is by Samantha Schweblin. She is an Argentinian author. This is her first book to be translated into English. The original Spanish one was written in 2005, I believe, which was 2 years ago. This has been very beautifully published by Riverhead Books. It is a hardback, very compact and small, and very, very nice illustration on the front cover. It's the size of my head, so it's a very small hardback. The book is quite short. It's 180 pages long, more or less. On the inside, it looks like this. There's not a lot of text on every page. It has very wide margins, and the text, the font is really big. So it's a very short book, and the nature of the book, both in writing, in style, and in story, pretty much demands that you read it in one go. I read it almost in one go. I read it over 2 days. I started it yesterday, last night, and I just finished it like a couple of hours ago. So I really, really, really enjoyed this book. To me, this is a very solid 4-star book. So it's definitely right now one of the best things I've read so far this year, along with The Blue Girl, for example. Talking about The Blue Girl, this book actually reminded me a lot of The Blue Girl by Laurie Foos, which is a very similar novel in terms of the tone and the creepiness and the use of language and some of the themes, for example, motherhood. Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin is a weird book. It certainly cannot be classified as horror or any other genre, really. This is a very unique book in a lot of ways, and I think that's its strongest suit. It's very unique. The writing style is lyrical, it's poetic at times, it's gruesome at parts, it's really scary at parts, but it's really unique. And though I think most of that comes from the way that Samantha Schweblin decided to tell this story. Her storytelling here is fabulous. Basically, without giving anything away, any spoilers, this follows the premise of we have a woman who is dying in a hospital bed, and she's having a conversation with a very, very young boy, a toddler almost. They're having this weird conversation, and she is on this fever dream, which is very trippy, almost hallucinatory. And as a reader, you get to experience that, and you become fully immersed in that experience, and you become sort of involved in this dreamlike, feverish experience, which I think is, like I said, the book's strongest suit. The book was very atmospheric, very, very surreal and weird. Sometimes, well, for the most part, I felt like I had no idea of what was going on, but I was still loving it. The book is very intriguing, very mysterious, definitely a page turner in every way. It's very suspenseful. And something that I just adored about Samantha Schweblin's writing style, again, is how she creates almost a physical, a very physical tension. And she maintains this physical tension throughout the entire book, from page 1 to the last one. So I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm looking forward to reading your comments down below about these books or any other books that you would like to talk about. I'm Just One Reader. I will see you on the next video.